So I was diagnosed with arthritis when I was in grade 2. And my dad said, never use your illness as an excuse. And for somebody who's chronically ill, you can use your illness for an excuse all the time. And it's a legitimate excuse because you're, in bed, miserable, exhausted. If you don't want to do something, it's because your body's inflamed, right? Like, it's understandable, but it doesn't help you to use it as an excuse. You're not going to dig yourself out of the, hell you're in by saying, oh, well, there's nothing I can do because of my arthritis or because of whatever you're suffering from. So don't use your illness as an excuse.
Hey guys, today we have a very, very, very special guest with us. She is Mikhaila Peterson. Mikhaila Peterson is a podcaster, CEO, and a lifestyle and diet blogger. Mikhaila speaks with thought leaders, industry changers, and world-class experts on health, culture, mindset, politics, and on many other topics in her podcast to bring awareness to general public in the most interesting way you have ever seen. Her background of overcoming severe autoimmune and mood disorders with diet and lifestyle alone made her a beacon of light to the people who are suffering from them. I highly believe that Mikhaila Peterson is on a mission to change the world for the better by making people resilient and to make them realize that they can have control over their own life. I'm very happy and honored to invite Mikhaila Peterson to the show. Thanks, Mikhaila, for coming to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to talk to you.
Mikhaila, before we go into the questions, can you share where can people connect with you?
Yeah, I'm probably most active on YouTube. If you just type in Mikhaila Peterson, my podcast is in video form on YouTube, or it's on podcasting sites, or I'm Mikhaila Peterson on Instagram, or Mikhaila Alexis on Twitter.
Thank you, Mikhaila. Mikhaila, my first question is, there is a lot of stigma attached to mental illness. What is your advice to the people who are afraid to talk about their mental health?
I would say everybody suffers from anxiety at some point. So it's not as if you've done something wrong if you're suffering mentally. There are things you should look into. Like, I would recommend looking into diet. And I think that there are things you can do to help your mental illness. If it's because you're stressed, ideally you can remove the stress from your life. If it's something that you can't control, then you just have to figure out how to get through it. But everybody has a hard time. Most people have a hard time at some point mentally, and it's not anything to be embarrassed about. And if you have people around who care for you, then talk to them because they're going to want to help you. So don't be ashamed about it. And I know that there's more awareness of it in the West. And I know that there are some cultures where you're kind of insulted if you have some sort of mental problem or bullied. But that's not because mental problems aren't there. It's because people aren't talking about it. So don't be afraid to talk to people about it or reach out to people online. But there are things you can do, I think.
Thank you, Mikhaila. Mikhaila, when did you realize that there is a link between diet and mental health?
When I was 23, and I didn't think that there was a link before that. I was told by my parents and the medical system and people around me that I had major depressive disorder, and I had also been diagnosed with bipolar type 2. And I was taking medication for it, and I was told I had a chemical imbalance, and it was just something I was going to have to deal with forever. And I was taking medications to try and balance my serotonin issue. So that's what I was told. When I was 23, I went on a very low carb diet. So I was eating a lot of meat, a lot of greens, sweet potatoes, but not any grains or dairy, not any processed foods. So I went on a low carb diet to treat an autoimmune disorder I had. So I had arthritis along with the depression or bipolar or whatever it was. So I went on this low carb diet, and my arthritis got better on the low carb diet, but my mental health also improved massively. So after about 3 months on the diet, my mental health improved, and I thought, how is this possible? How is it that I went on a low carb diet and my crippling depression, which was it was ruining my life, fatigue, depression, lifted? I thought, how is that possible? And so I noticed there was a link kind of accidentally when I was trying to treat my autoimmune condition with diet, and my mood improved as well.
Thank you, Mikhaila. Mikhaila, many people don't know that mental health issues are often misdiagnosed. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder in grade 5, and then I was diagnosed with bipolar type 2 in, I think it was grade 10. And my belief is that a lot of these disorders stem from inflammation in the body, and inflammation can stem from high carb or processed foods that you're consuming that your body's like not happy with. And some people are going to have more inflammation caused by that than others, and that can cause some mental health issues. So, misdiagnosed, I would say the proper way to treat them would be to look at lifestyle first, to say, okay, what are you eating? What's your diet like? Like, are you eating a lot of grains, a lot of carbs, a lot of processed foods? Lower that. Try and eat whole foods. Eat more meat. Meat is not the culprit here. And eat fewer carbs. See if that improves your mental health. Look at how much you're exercising. Look at how much you're sleeping. Look at your relationships. Look at your family relationships. Like, if you have a sick family member, then that's going to be a bit different. But if everything in your life seems to be going well and you're suffering mentally, you have to look at lifestyle factors. I would say, I don't know if I'd call it misdiagnosed, because you might actually be depressed. So that might be the correct diagnosis, but there are definitely ways to treat it that work better than other ways. Like treating with medication, they come with a whole host of side effects. They're very difficult to get off of once you're on them, which isn't something you're told by doctors, because doctors sometimes aren't actually aware of how hard it is to get off of these medications. So there are things you can do. I would definitely look at lifestyle first. And in lifestyle, I would definitely look at diet first, because that's the easiest thing you can control, and that usually works the best.
Thank you, Mikhaila. Mikhaila, how should one behave with the people who are sick? The reason why I'm asking this question is that I saw your Instagram post, which was so moving that many people show anger on sick people, which is totally
Yeah.
unfair.
So that's tricky. I would say, coming from somebody who is chronically ill, if you're sick around people, like I said in that clip, they can get mad at you because they don't know what to do. So they just get frustrated and mad, and they're like, why are you acting like this? Stop acting like this. Um, I would say it's a tricky subject to broach, because if you're talking to somebody with a mental illness or who's depressed, they can be super touchy about it. So you're not going to come up to someone and say, hey, you should fix your diet, because they're just going to be insulted and mad and saying, how can you tell me my symptoms are caused by diet? Like, you don't understand how hard it is. So that's not the way to go. So what I would do is try and be compassionate and patient, rather than being angry. Try to talk to them. I mean, if you are mad, say, this is scaring me. I'm sorry you're hurting, but it's scaring me as well. Let's try and make a plan and figure out how we can get through this. Then they think they're not alone. You're on their team instead of against them. And then start researching. And like I said before, look into lifestyle, look into diet. So if you can lead them to areas of the internet where there are doctors talking about how to use low carb or a carnivore diet for mental health, start watching those videos. You could watch videos with them initially, depending on how bad they're feeling. They're probably not inclined to go do this on their own. They might be, but you could watch some videos with them, try and get them to watch videos that don't blame them for how they're feeling, because it's not their fault they're feeling that way, but there are things they can do about it.
That's a great point, Mikhaila. Thank you so much. It really helps people because many people don't know what to do. So thank you. Uh,
Yeah, no wonder it's scary. Like, mental health is scary to deal with when you're experiencing it and when you're seeing it in other people. So that's totally understandable.
Thank you, Mikhaila. Mikhaila, how to deal with verbal abuse?
Okay. So would this be verbal abuse from somebody experiencing mental illness or just in general?
In general, I'm asking.
Okay. Well, I'd probably try and separate myself from the situation. So if you're getting yelled at about something, or if someone's being cruel to you, I would leave that situation. Go to another room, go for a walk, like get out of that situation so you can think clearly. Because if you're getting yelled at and you're in a scary situation, you're not going to be thinking clearly. You're going to be scared. You're just going to end up with your kind of reptile brain taking over, trying to get you not to panic, right? So if you're being verbally abused by somebody, leave, try and get out of the situation and go for a walk. Try and think clearly. Try to find somebody you can talk to that you feel safe with that isn't in that situation.
Thank you, Mikhaila. Mikhaila, many people take psychiatric medicine to temporarily treat their diseases, like their issues. What is the danger in that?
So I took SSRIs. The SSRI I took was called Cipralex, and I took that from the age of 12 till I was 23. And I started using diet to treat my mental health problems. And when I stopped taking it, I had severe withdrawal. So the doctors told me that it was my mental illness coming back, right? That's what they thought the withdrawal was. But it was really SSRI withdrawal. And it took 2.5 years to go away. So I was on them for 11 years and it took 2.5 years to go away. Short-term use, depending on the medication, might be okay. You have to really look at this situationally. If you're in a situation where a family member is dying and you're so upset that you're going to hurt yourself, then taking, 2 weeks of an antidepressant, if that can get you through it, might not be the end of the world. Taking these medications long term can cause withdrawal. There are no studies on medications longer than 6 to 8 weeks on humans. So people are, yeah, that's crazy, right? People are prescribed these medications for like 5 years. There's no studies on the effect of the brain of these medications after 5 years. We do know that they cause withdrawal. Short-term use of something like an SSRI doesn't look like it causes withdrawal. Then you get into other medications like benzodiazepines. Now, even short-term use of benzodiazepines can cause severe withdrawal. It depends on the person. Some people can get away with it. It depends on the dose. Higher doses cause more withdrawal. It depends on the benzodiazepine. Short-acting ones seem to cause less withdrawal than long-acting ones. So, there's different situations, but benzodiazepines, it looks like anything more than 5 days in a row causes withdrawal. So those I would just avoid at all costs. SSRIs, if you're really in trouble, might be okay for a couple of weeks. But any long-term use hasn't been studied, and it absolutely crippled me when I stopped taking them after 11 years. So if there's anything else you can do, if that's hanging out with friends, exercising, going to a low-carb diet so it's less inflammatory, do that first, right? But if you're in a situation where you're going to hurt yourself, then maybe start looking at something like an SSRI. Not that I'm a doctor, but that's been my experience.
Thank you so much, Mikhaila, for sharing that. Yeah. Mikhaila, how to deal with the intentional hate or discredit when we are trying to spread the truth?
Yeah, well, it's tricky because people are very skeptical about anybody talking about health online. And it's no wonder, because if you're a sick person, you'll go to anybody for help, right? And you'll end up going to people who are not good people and who are taking your money because they want money. So it's not surprising that people who are talking about a low carb or a zero carb approach or trying to look at alternative ways to deal with health get hate. Because it's confusing too, that you can say something like, oh, a zero carb diet can help your severe mental problem. It doesn't even sound real. So I would say just keep, if you're on social media and you're trying to spread awareness and you're getting a lot of hate, block those people, right? You don't need that. You're not going to change their minds. Just block those people so you don't get that negative attention in your life, because you don't need it. And just keep talking to people who are listening to you, because you're going to find people who you can help. So if you help, 10 people and one person hates you, just don't even bother with that one person. They're probably angry at other things in their life. So block them, keep helping other people, and understand that it's a controversial subject because it hasn't been studied enough. So a lot of it's anecdotal. So it's going to be controversial. You're going to get hate, unfortunately, but you can still help a lot of people.
Thank you, Mikhaila. That really works. I know. Yeah. Mikhaila, what to do when parents have mental health issues?
So again, Well, I've dealt with family members with mental health issues. My dad also suffers from severe depression, and you educate. So share videos, share resources, talk about your experience. Like one of the ways that I've spread kind of knowledge about the carnivore diet to people and had them actually believe me is because I've said, hey, look what happened to me. Look what it did for me. So you're not exactly forcing them into it, right? You're not saying you're doing something wrong. You should do this. It's your fault. You're saying, hey, I was really suffering. Look at what it did for me. And then they can kind of understand, maybe it'll work for me. If they don't make that connection, then you can say, maybe this is something you should look into. Here are some resources gently. It's tricky when you're dealing with people with mental health issues because they're already distrustful. That's part of having mental health issues is you're neurotic, you don't trust people, you're having a hard time, you're upset. And so you're already starting way below neutral. So just make sure that they know you're on their side and try and educate yourself with them and make sure it doesn't look like blame.
Thank you, Mikhaila. Mikhaila, what are the top 3 things that you have learned from your father, Jordan Peterson?
Okay, top 3, let me think. So one would be not to feel sorry for myself. So I was diagnosed with arthritis when I was in grade 2, and my dad said never use your illness as an excuse. And for somebody who's chronically ill, you can use your illness for an excuse all the time, and it's a legitimate excuse because you're, in bed, miserable, exhausted. If you don't want to do something, it's because your body's inflamed, right? Like it's understandable, but it doesn't help you to use it as an excuse. You're not going to dig yourself out of the, hell you're in by saying, oh, well, there's nothing I can do because of my arthritis or because of whatever you're suffering from. So don't use your illness as an excuse. There's one. One of my favorite rules that he taught me was he said, I only have one rule. Don't listen to stupid rules. So that was his one rule. Number 3, top 3 things. I don't know if this counts exactly. Oh, actually, no, I'll use this one instead. One of his rules is treat yourself like someone who you're trying to help. So that's one of his rules. That's my favorite rule, I think, because it tries to get you outside of your head, looking in on your life as if you're your friend, rather than being hard on yourself, being like, why am I not doing this? Why am I not doing well enough? Treat yourself as if you're someone you're trying to help. So I would say those are my top 3 lessons.
Super awesome. Thank you so much, Mikhaila. Mikhaila, why do we mess up sometimes despite knowing what to do?
Life is hard. Life is hard. And so maybe you're stressed out one day. Maybe you had a terrible day at work. Like say you're trying to do a new diet and you've cut out a whole bunch of things and one day you're like, screw it, I'm having a pizza, right? And then the next day you don't feel as good and you're like, why did I do that? Do I not have enough self-control? Like what is it? And it's best, you should give yourself a little bit of hell. Like you shouldn't let yourself completely off the hook. You should feel a little bit bad, but you don't want to beat yourself over the head with whatever you did. You just say, you know what? Okay, I'll try and do better next time. I'll forgive myself for that and I'll just start again today. Right? So people do things wrong because life is really hard. So even if you're trying your best, you can have a bad day at work. You can have someone you love get sick. You can have both of those happen at the same time, right? You can lose out on a relationship that you loved, right? And then you get stressed, you're full of cortisol, you're freaking out, and then you can mess up on something you're focused on, but it's not because you're a bad person, it's because life is hard.
Thank you, Mikhaila. That sums it up. Thank you. Mikhaila, now we have questions from subscribers. So they when I posted that you are coming, the community section blown up. Like many people.
Oh, that's cool.
Ask her this, ask her this. Like they have so many questions. So I selected top ones. So
Great.
Laura Hoff, daughter of Wim Hof, is asking you a question. What do you want to leave as a legacy in terms of lesson to this world?
If I wanted to leave, that's tricky. So there are two things I'd like to focus on. I'm going to answer that with two things. One, I'd like to bring more awareness to the carnivore diet, specifically the diet I'm doing, which I call the lion diet, which is all meat. So I'd like to bring more awareness that that can be used as an elimination diet to treat health problems, or at least to figure out what you're eating that's bothering you. I'd really like to spread awareness about that because it completely changed my life. And then I guess the lesson I'd like people to learn is that no matter what kind of hell you're in, there are usually things you can do to improve it. So you have the power, for lack of a better word, within yourself to improve whatever hell you're in. So if you're chronically ill and you're told by the medical system that, oh, there's nothing you can do, you're just unlucky, don't believe that. There are things you can do. And of course, this is on a spectrum. There are people that are having a way harder time than other people. But in general, you have the power to improve your life. So don't let anybody tell you that you don't.
Thank you, Mikhaila. Indirectly, you are saying that we can have the control over our
Yeah,
own life.
exactly.
Thank you, Mikhaila. Mikhaila Salike Norton is asking, are you aware of oxalates causing depression, anxiety, and cognitive problems?
I am. I looked into a number of issues that could have been caused by plant toxins and tried to identify exactly which one it was. But to tell you the truth, sweet potatoes, for instance, very high in oxalates, spinach, high in oxalates. I didn't have issues with those really. So when I went low carb, I was eating a lot of meat, a lot of fish, sweet potatoes, a lot of greens. And that was basically my diet. It was very strict like that, but I did that for about a year and a half, and all my symptoms went away. My arthritis went away, my depression went away. It wasn't until I stopped taking my SSRIs and I had severe SSRI withdrawal that I actually went to the carnivore diet. So I think for some issues, for some people, oxalates can be a huge issue, and it's worth knowing about and looking into, just like histamines or other plant toxins. But I wouldn't call oxalates the problem, right? I don't think that they're the problem with plants for everybody. I don't think they were for me. I think there were other factors in play, but I think that what Sally does is really interesting and really worth looking into. And being aware of these plant toxins is worth knowing, but I wouldn't chalk up all problems to one type of plant toxin.
Thank you, Mikhaila. Mikhaila, next question is, I am a weak-minded person. How to become strong?
First of all, you're not necessarily a weak-minded person. Maybe your goals are too big. So what I would suggest is you're trying to accomplish something and it's huge, right? Make it achievable. So write down what your goal is and then break it into steps in order to get there. And if you think you're too weak-minded to achieve the first step, break that first step down, right? Break it down so small that you're like, okay, that's easy. I'll do that. And then do that. And then you're one tiny step closer to your goal. So some people are more, I wouldn't say weak-minded. I would say some people are more conscientious than others. So some people are going to have an easier time saying, that's my goal, I'll just do it. Some people have an easier time with that for sure than other people. But for people who have a harder time with that, and maybe for people who aren't as conscientious, you just need to break down your goal into smaller steps until one of those steps you think you can do, and then start with that. That'd be my suggestion there.
Thank you, Mikhaila. Mikhaila, next question is, I have no energy, no interest, no focus. How to overcome depression in a practical way?
So the minimum I usually suggest people try is eliminating grains. So if you don't want to go to the carnivore diet, it's an extreme diet. I really believe in it. And if you're really suffering, I think it's the fastest way to stop suffering. But if you're like, you know what? No, it's too hard. I feel terrible. I don't know how to cook meat. I don't know how to get meat. If you're in that stage, at least eliminate grains, particularly gluten-containing grains. So something like wheat or spelt, like get rid of those. If you can, just get rid of grains. So focus on eating whole foods. If you're willing to do more than that, I would say cut out grains and dairy. If you can get rid of grains and dairy in your diet, Those are hugely inflammatory for a lot of people. They could easily be contributing to fatigue and depression. It's not that hard if you prioritize eating meat, vegetables, fruit, ideally focused on the meat, but that's implementable. I think that's practical, and I think that would help somebody suffering from fatigue and depression rather rapidly. I would give that a month. I usually suggest giving these diets a month because your body kind of freaks out when you first eliminate foods and you miss them and you crave them. So you want to give yourself time to get used to the diet. But I would say within a month you would start feeling better if you eliminated grains and if you could grains and dairy.
Thank you, Mikhaila. Mikhaila, what are your top 3 mental health care habits?
So number one is diet, for sure, hands down. I'm very strict with my diet. I eat mostly lamb and beef. Um, Sometimes I'll have fish, sometimes I'll have chicken, but like 95% of it is lamb and beef. And if I start incorporating other foods in, I start getting sluggish, I get more anxious, and so I don't do that. So my number one priority is my diet. Now I have other health reasons to focus on diet, like arthritis, skin, like digestive issues, like all that. But mental health, diet would be number one. Number two, and I'm not as strict with this as I should be, but exercise. So once you remove inflammatory components of your diet, exercise can really help. Some people get help from exercise for mental health before they fix their diet. I didn't. It didn't work like that for me. I had to fix my diet, then exercise started to work. So if you can exercise even a little bit every day, that can massively improve things. Sleep. Sleep is so underlooked for mental health. Like if you're not getting 8 hours of sleep or say 7 hours of sleep a night, and you're suffering from anxiety, it could easily be because you're not sleeping properly. If you can try to get into bed around 11, you get more deep sleep the earlier you sleep. So if you go to sleep at 10 or 11, you're going to get more deep sleep than if you go to bed at 12:30 or 1. And it can be twice as much deep sleep, which technically means you don't have to sleep as many hours if you go to bed earlier. So I would say first look at your diet and try to eliminate inflammatory components, grains, dairy, focus on meat, exercise if you can. I'd even put sleep above exercise. Do diet, sleep, exercise. That'd be the 3 tips.
Thank you, Mikhaila. Mikhaila, can we heal autoimmune issues with diet?
So I healed my autoimmune issues with diet. I had my hip and ankle replaced when I was 17 from the arthritis. I had been suffering from the age of 2, and it's in remission. I don't take any medications. I was taking immune suppressants from the age of 8 to 23, injections, immunosuppressive medications that I injected myself. I don't do that anymore. That's completely kept in check with diet. Now, if I start adding in foods like fruit, then after a few weeks, I can feel my wrists are hurting, my shoulders are hurting, my knees are hurting, and I can feel the arthritis come back. So I'm stuck on this diet because of the autoimmune condition I have. I've seen tens of thousands of other people who have autoimmune issues put them into remission with diet. A lot of those people end up still being restricted once it goes into remission. Like they can't put it into remission and then start eating a whole bunch of foods again, or it comes back. But I think, I still had arthritis when I was taking immunosuppressive medications. Like I said, I had my hip and ankle replaced when I was 17. That was after 9 years on medication. So it didn't put my arthritis into remission, right? It didn't work. I still had my hip and ankle replaced. Diet has gotten rid of all my autoimmune conditions, and I've seen it work for other people. So that's my answer to that question.
Perfect answer, Mikhaila. Thank you. Mikhaila, how to talk with ourselves?
I think it depends on the person, but at least for me, I'm trying to practice being nicer. So if I'm like, it's the end of the day, I'm like, oh, I didn't accomplish, half of the things on my to-do list. I missed a couple of things I put in my schedule. I'm like, you know what? Maybe my schedule is a little bit too full. Like maybe I overbooked myself. right? You don't have to beat yourself over the head every day if you're actually doing your best, right? If you're doing your best, be nice to yourself. So that rule I was talking about that my dad has, which is treat yourself as if you're someone worth helping. It's something like that. I'm butchering it a little bit, but it's something like that. So talk to yourself in that way. Talk to yourself as if you are your best friend.
Awesome. Question is how to control tension, unnecessary thoughts, and anxiety. Maybe they are asking the question again.
Hmm. How to control that? So again, I mean, I always go to diet first, right? If you're already looking at, so say you've already gone to a carnivore diet. Say you went low carb, you still couldn't control the thoughts. Then you went to the carnivore diet, you've been on it for like 6 weeks, and you're still having these thoughts. I would probably, well, make sure you're exercising, make sure you're sleeping properly, get into the sun. Now, if all of your lifestyle components are dealt with, start looking at your relationships, start looking at your job. Like, is there any aspect of your life that's making you unhappy? Right? So try and identify those problems and then figure out how to fix those. If you're still having thoughts that are making you anxious, I've done a lot of therapy for myself by writing. So a lot of these thoughts I don't have them as much anymore, but I still get stressed just like any person would. Um, I write. So I make to-do lists. Like if there are things in my head that I'm like, I haven't done this or this is stressing me out, I try and write it down and figure it out on paper or talk to somebody about it because sometimes maybe you're not talking to enough people. Like maybe you have these thoughts, everything in your life is in order, like I said, diet, exercise, sleep. Maybe there are things you haven't figured out because you need to talk it out with someone. And if you can't talk it out with someone, you could write it down on paper, and that can sometimes get them out of your head.
Thank you, Michaela. Like, do you write like morning papers or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, some people put journaling in the morning. Like they'll have a morning routine and they'll journal for 15 minutes. If I have trouble sleeping, this is when I was more organized. I'm traveling now, so I'm less organized, but I had a journal by my bed. So if I had these like, oh my God, this, like, oh my God, this, I'd just write it down in the journal and then I was like, you know what? I'm not going to forget about it. It's in the journal, but I don't have to repeatedly think about it. So yeah, ideally you incorporate that into some sort of evening or morning routine. If you're super organized, that would be the best option for sure.
Thank you, Michaela. Michaela, last but one question. How to overcome instant mood swings and be consistent?
Hmm. Again, similar answer to before, I'd make sure your diet is in order. Like any problem in your life that's causing you anxiety, if you're like, yeah, I feel really horrible about this, but I can't really understand why because everything in my life is kind of okay. So what's going on? Look at your diet. The carnivore diet's a really easy way to lower levels of inflammation. It's super easy, right? But if you're not willing to do that, get rid of the grains, get rid of the dairy, drink water. That's a big one that I haven't mentioned. Is don't drink juice and don't drink milk. Like tea is okay, but drink water. We're not supposed to be living off of soda or even milk, juice. We're supposed to be drinking water. So just drinking water can help. But remove grains, remove dairy, switch over to drinking water. That'll lower levels of inflammation. That'll probably help with mood swings. Like a lot of people get kind of highs and lows when they're eating a lot of carbs. So they eat breakfast. If you're eating something like, I don't know, at least in North America, it's like you eat cereal, which is basically just it's grains covered in sugar, right? And you get this high, this whole bunch of energy after you have your bowl of cereal or bowl of sugar, and then you get a crash. So sometimes these mood swings can be caused by the ups and downs of having, your blood sugar skyrocket and then plummet. And so a lot of that can be dealt with by diet. So again, look at diet first.
Thank you, Michaela. Michaela, last question. Would you like to issue a 7-day challenge to our subscribers?
7 days? Okay, so if I was going to do a challenge that I thought would be good for people, and it was only going to be 7 days, I would say stop eating grains. That'd be what I think people could see a difference in 7 days if they cut out grains. Usually, if I'm talking about the carnivore diet, I'm like, you have to try that for 6 weeks. because you go into like, it depends on the person. Some people have an easy time transitioning over, but a lot of people go into carb withdrawal and they feel worse. So if you only do it for a week or two, you end up feeling worse. So you have to set out and do that for 6 weeks. If it was 7 days, I'd say cut out the grains and try and prioritize eating meat and just see if you feel different. Like write down your symptoms, write down your mood out of 10 for a week, write down your fatigue levels every day and see if you feel different on day 7.
Thank you, Mikhaila, for answering that. And thank you so much, Mikhaila, for coming to the show and helping us to become healthy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having this channel. Like seriously, and the work you've done on yourself, it's impressive. And the number of people you're reaching, it's great. I think the more people who talk about this, the more people can stop suffering and be helped. So good for you.
Thank you.
Subscribe to BNS Goku Great.